Hey everyone, and welcome. First, I wanted to thank everyone who registered for today's event. This webinar precedes the opening of Shelburne Museum's 2025 exhibition, Dahlov Ipcar, The Possibilities of Pattern. The exhibition highlights Dahlov's expansive work in textiles, including embroidery, fabric collage, extraordinary soft sculptures, and related works in a variety of media, many of which have never been publicly displayed before. Before we get started, I want to extend a special thanks to Rachel Wall's Fine Art, without whom any of this would be possible. Rachel has graciously shared her love and deep knowledge of Dahlov's work and world, helped to organize loans, and has been a passionate driving force behind this project. Further, I'd like to thank the Ipcar family, the Zorak family, and a handful of very generous private lenders to the exhibition who've graciously agreed to share their stories and part with their artworks for the duration of Shelburne Museum's 2025 season. My most sincere thanks goes out to you all. For the next 30 minutes or so, my goal is to take us all on a journey through the world of Dahlov Ipcar. We will learn a little bit about the artist's biography and influences, and most importantly, we'll take a close look at how much of her body of work during the mid to late 20th century was influenced by commercially available printed textiles that she purchased at local stores near her home in Maine, like Woolworth's. Most people who know the name Dahlov Ipcar know it from her success as an author and illustrator of children's books. Ipcar's first publishing success came in 1945 when she was selected to illustrate Margaret Wise Brown's book, The Little Fisherman. Finding that she was as interested in the lyrical possibilities of words as well as pictures, Ipcar began to experiment with writing and illustrating her own stories. The three books you see here were first published between 1961 and 1968, and all play a role in our exhibition here at the museum this year. If I had to choose a favorite book by Ipcar, I think I would choose Whisperings and Other Things, first published in 1967. While the book looks like it's meant for children, its pages contain a compilation of poems about themes ranging from dream horses and alley cats to holidays and seasonal change. To get us all in the correct frame of mind, I'd like to share the book's opening poem, All These I Hear. For those of you who have active imaginations, I encourage you to close your eyes. Here we go. All these I hear, whiskers and wings and other whispering things, soft fur and golden eyes and quiet paws, smooth swishing tails, transparent fins, red feathery gills, and gleaming rainbow scales. Fern-like antenna, dreamlight velvet wings with peacock eyes, soft dappled flanks, wet noses, tapered ears, the shape of shells. Small flashing feathered emeralds, fire flecked, soft down, smooth eggs, and stillness balanced on long, slender legs. Feathers and fur and fins and all other things fill my heart with their soft whisperings. Okay, you can open your eyes. What strikes me about Ipcar's writing is how evocative the text is. Her rhythmic descriptions conjure forms, colors, textures, and even sound. The material is enjoyable no matter your age. The same impulses that drove Dahlov to create her lyrical stories translated into artworks in a variety of media. The pictures on the screen you see here are selections from the artist's imaginative work in soft sculpture, painting, and even quilting. On the far left, you see a detail of Ipcar's golden pheasant. This is a soft sculpture that was made in 1974, and I think it gives you a really lovely sense of how Ipcar was interested in using all these different really raucous patterns to approximate and then enliven the kinds of animals that she was familiar with in the world. The image in the center is a detail from Dahlov's painting Harlequin Jungle, finished in 1972. This is a large work. It's actually 40 inches tall by 50 inches wide and is on display in the exhibition. This is just a small detail from it, but what I love are the sort of four things that I pull out of it. One is this terrific giraffe with its long black tongue reaching up into the tree leaves. And in a kind of conflation of spaces and angles of um, depth in the picture plane, you see that lovely crocodile or alligator face with a big yellow eye poking out from the right side. On the left, that pink ibis is just alighting into some grass. And on the far right at the top, you see just the hint of a striped or spotted tail curling around a tree branch. And this kind of active graphic quality really animates a lot of Dahlov's work. We're going to talk about that more today. Finally, on the far right, you see a detail of a quilt block from Dahlov's 1940 quilt that she made for her children, Robert and Charlie. And here you see one of the family's Dalmatians. They had a whole series of Dalmatians. And so you'll see tonight that these black and white spotted creatures show up over and over again in Dahlov's work. So to understand the artist's technical abilities in cloth, it's helpful to know a little bit about Dahlov's mother, Marguerite Thompson Zorak. Dahlov painted this portrait of her mother in 1999, nearly 3 decades after her mother's passing. In the portrait, Marguerite sits in a rocking chair in the Zorak family's home in Georgetown, Maine. The living room walls are painted with flowers, plants, animals, and people. The slip-decorated earthenware ceramics on the mantel in the upper right corner of the composition are just one example of the decorative furnishings and Americana that enliven the family's home. Marguerite's hands are busy at work with an in-process tapestry that depicts Dahlov's family in the Ipcar family's kitchen. Both of Dahlov's parents were artists. She noted in an interview, quote, "I grew up in Greenwich Village in New York City in a home full of modern art, of Fauvism and Cubism, in a creative atmosphere where everything in our home was exciting and different from other people's homes." From the beginning, art seemed a natural part of life. My father would be carving in one large room of our apartment, wood chips all over the floor, with his finished carved figures standing about like members of the family. His oil paintings, marvelous, mysterious, semi-cubistic, and colorful, hung on the walls. My mother would be painting in the adjoining room, which was both studio and living room. I could not have imagined a life without paintings on the walls and color everywhere. Dahlov went on to add, quote, "My mother designed and made all her own clothes, and ours too. My brother and I went to school in clothes embroidered with fantastic flowers. The principal once called my mother in and tried to tell her that she shouldn't send us to school in such fancy clothes. My mother said, quote, 'I can't afford to buy ordinary clothes, and if I'm going to make something, it has to be something beautiful.'" While Dahlov and her family spent winters in New York City, they spent summers in more rural locations. In 1923, when Dahlov was about 5 years old, the Zorak family purchased a property on Georgetown Island, Maine. The main house, now on the National Historic Register, located on Robin Hood Road and known as the Benjamin Riggs House, is the most architecturally distinctive house in Georgetown's Robin Hood area. Describing the home in a 2001 interview, Dahlov remarked, quote, "My mother prepared, painted, and furnished it with antiques, which at that time cost much less than up-to-date furniture. The front lawn sloped down to Robin Hood Cove. There were wonderful rocky ledges and mudflats to explore, and we swam and fished and rode. My brother raked blueberries to sell, and he put out lobster traps. I got tired of fishing every day to catch bait for him, but we all enjoyed the lobsters." Both of Dahlov's parents worked to encourage her creativity and imagination, but her mother, Marguerite, was especially active when it came to developing Dahlov's skills with needle and thread. This embroidery was started the first summer the family was in Georgetown, when Dahlov was 5, and it was completed 6 years later. The house on the right side of the composition represents the Benjamin Riggs house, where the Zorak family lived seasonally. A close look at the right window of the house reveals Dahlov's mother, Marguerite, peering out from behind colorful curtains with bright lips. The two children who swing from the tree on the left side of the composition are Dahlov and her brother Tessum. If you look closely, you will see Dahlov's first name stitched into the base of the tree in the lower left corner of the composition. I'm sorry, that's the lower left corner of the composition. It's worth noting that Dahlov's mother, Marguerite, was not formally trained in textile design, but she had traveled widely and took inspiration from a broad range of decorative textiles, especially embroidered materials from India and China. The variety of different kinds of stitches in this picture is notable in part because it demonstrates how Dahlov used needle and thread to tell a story, even as she was developing the manual dexterity to accomplish the task at hand. Dahlov's childhood was filled with art making, actively encouraged by her parents who had been involved with progressive education initiatives in New York City. In 1939, when Dahlov was just 21 years old, many of the artwork she had created as a child were shown at the Museum of Modern Art in an exhibition titled Creative Growth, Childhood to Maturity. The exhibition marked the opening of the Young People's Gallery at the museum, a special space meant to serve the needs of art students between the ages of 12 and 18. The press release noted, quote, "Her father, the noted sculptor William Zorak, preserved these records of his daughter's creative work from babyhood to maturity." A selection of important examples was selected by Victor D'Amico, head of the museum's education department. D'Amico felt Ipcar was a living testament to the, quote, "uninhibited progress a child can make with proper stimulation and encouragement from intelligent teachers and parents," end quote. It should be noted here that MoMA's education program was the first of its kind, opening the museum's doors and collections to any child in New York City. While Dahlov would later poo-poo the quality of her work as, quote, "the worst junk you ever saw," the exhibition was the first solo art show at MoMA to prominently feature a female artist. By the time the exhibition opened, however, Dahlov was busy with other projects. She had married Adolf Ipcar in 1936. After living briefly in New York City, the couple moved to Georgetown, Maine, and started a family. This embroidered family portrait was completed in 1944 by Marguerite Zorak. The embroidery is a view of the kitchen in the home where Dahlov and Adolf moved in the 1930s during the Depression. The house, a traditional Maine farmhouse with an L, was named Robin Hood Farm by the Ipcars. It is a property on the Zorak estate, formerly known as the Baker Farm, and is located next door to the Zorak's house. Before Dahlov and Adolf moved to Maine in the 1930s, the Baker Farm was where the Zorak's hired man lived. He was paid $50 per month to weed the vegetable gardens and care for the 2 horses and 2 cows owned by the Zorak family. He also oversaw haying the property and helped to prevent vandalism or theft while the Zorak family was in New York City. After the Ipcars moved to the Baker Farm, they began operating a dairy business of Jersey cows in the 1940s. This unconventional family portrait shows Dahlov on the left, tending to a large stove. As Dahlov pulls food from the oven, her husband Adolf stands at the kitchen sink, pumping water from a red hand pump. The Ipcars' 2 sons, Robert and Charlie, are here too. One plays with toys on a tabletop in the low foreground, while the other is stationed in his high chair on the left side of the composition. Inspiration for Dahlov's books often came from her family, especially her sons Robert and Charlie. One would ask for a story about a horse, and Dahlov wrote a book called One Horse Farm in 1950. Another would ask for a story about dinosaurs, which led to 1958's The Wonderful Egg. When asked what drove her to write books, Ipcar responded, quote, "To learn that reading is an exciting experience is the most important reason of all. For only through becoming a good reader can a child gain access to all learning." Here, what I love about this is you get the idea that Dahlov worked on multiple projects at once, and she was just surrounded by this raucous idea of all of these different images that were sort of in her brain that she was then translating to the page. The narrative of her 1965 book, The Calico Jungle, is related to a quilt Dahlov made for her family in 1940. You can see an overall view of the quilt on the right and the opening page from the book on the left. The text begins, quote, "Once there was a little boy whose mother made him a wonderful calico quilt for his bed. It was a beautiful quilt, all covered with jungle trees and flowers and animals." As the child in the story drifts off to sleep, the animals on the quilt come to life in his imagination and take him on adventures. This is the only known child's quilt that Dahlov made, and she created a first generation of soft sculptures with no wires to match each of the quilt's appliqued and embroidered blocks. In the book's text, tall giraffes hide with their heads above the treetops, eating leaves, like those on the left. In the very middle of the jungle is a lovely deep green pool where big black elephants give each other shower baths, like that one on the right. As you can see from these details of the 1940 quilt, the animals are cut from patterned calico cotton fabrics. The quilt blocks are also embellished with decorative embroidery, a more advanced version of the stitches Dahlov had practiced as a child with her mother. At about the time that Dahlov was dreaming up the Calico Jungle book, she was experimenting with cloth collage. In this 1961 composition, the artist used carefully cut and collaged printed cottons to animate the legendary story of the Garden of Eden. Central to creation stories in the Hebrew Bible and later Christian and Islamic traditions, the story of the Garden of Eden recounts how God shaped Adam and Eve, placed them in a paradise, and then expelled them after they ate from the forbidden tree of knowledge. This motif was one that was familiar to Dahlov. In the family's Greenwich Village home, her parents had painted a hallway with a large mural of the same subject, featuring a life-size Adam and Eve and a red and white snake coiled around the trunk of a large tree. A close look at this collage reveals a raucous menagerie of creatures. Animals including a fox, an antelope, a leopard, a peacock, and more surround Adam and Eve, as a serpent with a long forked tongue tempts them with fruit from the tree. And this is one of those works I would encourage those of you who are able to visit us at the museum to come and spend some time with this piece. It's a little bit difficult to get your eyes to adjust to it on the screen, but I would argue that in person, the more time you spend with this, the more rewarding the image really becomes. You get a sense of the kind of layered collaged aspect of this, and you begin to see more animals that pop out. For example, there's a peacock, at the very top of the screen on the sort of right side toward the center. There's a red fox on the far left near the bottom, near the striped leopard, or maybe a tiger. And then eventually you do see Adam and Eve pop out near the bottom. The cloth collage on the previous slide actually inspired Dahlov to try to publish the Calico Jungle story as a touch and feel book. Unfortunately, the added expense of the materials made this idea unviable from a commercial perspective. In 1964, she gave up finding a publisher and painted the illustrations for the story using the same patterns that she found in fabrics available at her local Woolworths. The pages of the 1965 book are filled with all kinds of critters that are distinguished by the decorative patterns that cover their bodies and fill their environment. Its illustrations explore a juxtaposition of shapes, colors, patterns, and light, marking a shift in the artist's style as she began to explore what she referred to as, quote, "the endless possibilities of patterns that could be found in bolts of cotton fabric." In the end, the publication was printed using the standard color processes of the time, but its illustrations are notable for the ways that they use abstract patterns to animate natural forms like flowers, butterflies, peacocks, rabbits, and more. In an interview with Robert Brown for the Archives of American Art in 1979, Dahlov noted that this marked a kind of turning point in her work. She commented, quote, "That kind of decorative picture began to carry over into my oil painting. I began to make the animals more decorative and designed and less realistic than they had been." And I love this here. You get a real sense of that when you look at like the rabbit with his little cotton tail in the lower corner and on the right, or the rabbit on the left that has this sort of bright orange with little floral motifs animating his body. And then, of course, I mean, who wouldn't notice the two beautiful peacocks in the very center? In addition to her two-dimensional work, Ipcar had started to fabricate soft sculptures of animals in the 1940s. First created as gifts and objects of daily use, these dynamic creatures are now appreciated for their lively patterns, careful construction, and expressive forms. The earliest soft sculptures, as mentioned before, were fairly flat and did not include the extra wiring that characterizes much of her later work in this medium. The soft sculptures that Dahlov created from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and later were more elaborate, much like the three creatures you see in the upper right of the image on your screen. Here, you can actually see a wire armature that has been set out next to the zebra that's in the middle. In terms of process, Ipcar would work out a drawing and then make a paper pattern for the various parts of the creatures. Then she would carefully cut out and piece together the forms in her studio, stuffing their bodies with batting and wires to provide volume and personality. According to Dahlov's gallerist, Rachel Walls, the artist did not use a sewing machine for any part of these creatures. Rather, she hand-stitched each one. They were then stuffed with synthetic fibers like polyester and nylon for durability, like those used in personal flotation devices. Sometimes Ipcar's materials are reminiscent of an animal's natural markings, while other choices are more stylized and abstract. And here is a good example of some of those. They're not the earliest, but they are soft sculptures that are on the earlier side. And so what you're looking at here are these three remarkable little fish, a sea mink, a flying fish, and a squirrel fish. And all of them use buttons for eyes that, actually look like they have a little sort of pupil in the middle. If you look at their dorsal fins and pectoral fins, you'll notice that they've been articulated with a little stuffing and stitching, but they're different shapes, right? She's thinking creatively about all of the different shapes that creatures in the sea have evolved to have. And she's integrating those to give these three little fish a little more life. I also love the bright colors that she's used, and in some cases, how they really approximate the real surface textures of an animal. For example, the fish in the upper right corner. That little kind of eyelet design looks just like fish scales. Here are three more. These were done a little later. These were probably done in the mid 1970s. And if you're able to come see them in person in the show, you'll notice that these three fish, which were generously lent through a private lender, they all have a little more volume to them. When you hold them, they feel more like you're holding a real fish that you've just caught. Not slimy, but hefty in that way. And again, you'll notice that their fins, their dorsal fins, their pectoral fins, their tail fins, all of them are clearly articulated. She's thought again about those perfect button eyes for each creature. And something else that's sort of nice that you can't see from this picture because it's embroidered sort of along the bottom is on most of her soft sculptures, if not all of them that I have seen, Dahlov Ipcar embroiders her name on them. And so instead of signing a painting, right, she has this little embroidered signature. But I really love these three fish. They, I think, are a really lovely counterweight to some of the earlier fish and show just how she was evolving her work as she moved through some of these creatures. This is another animal that I just loved. So this is a tiger shark made sometime, we think, in the 1970s. And when I first saw this tiger shark, it was hanging in Dahlov's studio at the family's home in Georgetown, Maine. And what was really great about it, Rachel Walls was so generous to provide an introduction to the family and arrange for a visit. But being able to see these creatures hanging in their natural environment and just really being a part of a much larger decorated environment where they seem to be perfectly at home was a real gift. You have to imagine in this studio, and I don't have any pictures of it for you tonight, but on the far end of it, there's a large window that lets in just this sea of light. And so all of these colors and patterns and creative materials are in this space, and they give you a real sense of what it might have been like to walk in on Dahlov working in her studio. This is another animal that I just love. So in addition to creating soft sculptures of real creatures, creatures that in theory you could link to, specific species, Dahlov created imaginary creatures. So this is one. This is dated 1974. It's her mythological seahorse. And yes, seahorses are real things in the ocean, but this doesn't look like any seahorse I've ever seen. It almost looks like the classical ideal of a seahorse, right? With this sort of horse's body for the torso and this long, almost mermaid-like tail, um, complete with a little bit of gold coloring in that blue and gold coiled tail. It's really a remarkable piece. This sweet opossum family, I think, is probably vying for everyone's favorite attention in the exhibition. She was made in 1968 with all six of her little babies attached to her coiled tail. And I just wanted to bring us back because one of the really lovely things about thinking about Dahlov's body of work is that everything is connected in some way. While she became known for her very, very successful and wide-ranging work in publishing, she was thinking about different iterations of the kinds of ideas that were being explored in her books. And so, for example, this possum family relates to a poem that is in the book Whisperings and Other Things. And I won't bother you by trying to read all these beautiful words to you myself. But I think it's enough to say that, these kinds of personalities that she tries out in her books, then they make their way to these soft sculptures and they sort of take on another life of their own. Then through the poetry, right? There is this sort of imaginative milieu that you're invited to immerse yourself in, which is just a delight. This is another really lovely creature from a private lender that Rachel was kind enough to help us arrange. This is a ferret created before 1976. This animal is installed in the same case as the opossum family, and I have to tell you, when you look at him, he looks like he's full of mischief. He looks like he's ready to pounce with those little feet and that arched back. Um, One of the things I think that is so magical about much of Dahlov's work is that the animals have a real personality and sense of presence. They're not a type, they are a specific enlivened kind of thing. And they look out at you with these sort of eyes that almost come alive, which is, I think it's a little bit of magic. Finally, I wanted to share this animal. A number of members on staff here, this is their very favorite. And this I think might run a close second favorite for me. So this is an anteater created sometime in the 1960s. And what I thought I would do, this anteater is related in some ways to Ipcar's 1964 publication, I Love My Anteater with an A. It was a book that was meant to teach young readers about the alphabet. But unlike many alphabet books, Ipcar didn't limit the text to simple verbiage. Each turn of the page reveals a quintet of qualities about a different animal, from anteaters from Afghanistan to zebras from Zanzibar. And it is lyrically one of the most fun books I have read in a long time. One of the nicest things about it is that, as an adult, you read it and it is just it's like a delicious book to read. So the entry for A reads, I love my anteater with an A because he is affectionate. I hate him with an A because he is argumentative. His name is Aristotle. He comes from Afghanistan. He lives on artichokes and asparagus, and he is an abstract artist. And as my husband pointed out to me the other day, didn't Salvador Dali have an anteater who was his pet? Anyhow, I love this guy. Um, we have other animals in the show. Dahlov created some extraordinary birds, and one of the things that was really fun about working on the installation here at Shelburne Museum is that some of them we were able to work with our conservation department to put into flight. And so this bird, made in 1977, is actually installed hanging in our galleries so that as he moves just a little bit, you get this lovely glint from this rhinestone eye, or from both of his rhinestone eyes. And here you get a sense as Dahlov's work with these soft sculptures is progressing, she's really creating these sort of animated bodies. You can almost imagine this bird sticking its feet out in front of it and getting ready to light on a branch. There are also animals like this. We had a quick preview of this golden pheasant at the beginning of tonight's time together, but I wanted to show you an overall picture because you get a sense of how both singular and unique each of these animals is. And so what do I mean by that? So if you take a look at the two brown feathers that extend off of the back of this golden pheasant, you'll notice that the top fabric is a batik that, is one pattern. The underside of the feathers, just like the underside of a real feather, is a different color, is a different pattern, and they complement one another. They also work with the wiring and the extra stitching that is in the tail so that you get this kind of almost ruffled tail feather surface that can be molded and shaped. The wings are lovely and do articulate from the body. And the body of the bird, I think for me, the shock of that sort of green and yellow print near the front, where on a real golden pheasant, you would have those sort of dark feathers that have a kind of emerald gleam to them. It reminds me of the poem that we opened with tonight, All These I Hear. But the fabrics themselves, I think, work so well together just to create this animated animal that you think is about to move. Finally, I thought I would end with these two creatures. One of the things that I've mentioned during our conversation this evening is that um, they really have a lot of personality. And I think these two guys, who are both gazelles made in the 1990s, um, give you a great idea of that kind of personality. The one in the foreground on the right side that you're looking at, is sort of more elongated, almost like he's getting ready to leap. Whereas the taller gazelle that is on the left looks like maybe he's stepping aside, maybe from a predator. Um, Dahlov Ipcar continued to create art right up until her passing in 27, just shy of her 100th birthday. But her imaginative spirit remains alive and well. If you've enjoyed the content here that we've explored during the webinar, I implore you to come visit us at the museum to see Ipcar's soft sculptures and more in the Dana Spencer Textile Hat and Fragrance Galleries. The exhibition will remain on view through the end of our 2025 season on October 26th. Before I conclude, I want to again extend a special thanks to Rachel Wall's Fine Art, the Ipcar family, the Zorak family, and a handful of very generous private lenders to the exhibition. My most sincere thanks goes out to you all. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll hand it over to Kat for questions and sign out. Good night.